Welcome back, everybody. This is Edwin, the Magic Engineer, and I'm here with my friend Gad D Lord, and he is the creator of MTG Studio, and I'm really happy to bring him on so you guys can actually see his face and hear him speak a little bit about it, and I'm going to be asking him some questions about where MTG Studio came from and where he sees future development going, and just kind of get some insights from the creator. So this is exciting for me because I've used this software for just years now. And so actually having the chance to speak to the guy that made the software that I spent so much time with is really exciting. And I was hoping that some of you guys were going to get a thrill out of this too. So anyways, Gad, you want to say hi to everybody?
Yeah, hi guys. Glad to have you, and perhaps I can give a little bit of an insight like how it all started. So around the year of 1995, 96, there was very popular having demo CDs, and you have some demo software, trial versions there. You install it, you like it, you buy it, you don't like it, you just move to the next CD. So there was a particular piece of software which was called Chandler, Wizards of the Coast kind of a software by that time.
The Microprose one. I remember
The
that. I
Microprose
still
one.
play that, by the way.
Yeah. If I actually recall correctly, there is something which is a continuation of that software, very unofficial one called Mana Link 3. And actually, MTG Studio is also having support for building Chandler decks if you still are into it.
Oh, that's fun.
And actually I got hooked to MTG. By that time, that game was not very popular. Actually, it was absolutely not popular anywhere around where I live, which is Bulgaria, Eastern Europe, just about Greece. And after a couple of years on a sunny beach, one friend of mine simply came to me and said, "You know, there is this magic kind of a thing called Magic Workstation. I know that you're a programmer. Can you crack it for me?" And was definitely not doing that. So actually, we made a good acquaintance with this guy. It turned out he's one of the best Bulgarian MTG official players, and he introduced me back to the game and put me into the shoes. I can build such a free tool for you for your own use. It was the 14th of August 2003, if I recall correctly,
Uh-huh.
and kind of by December, it took some time. By December, by Christmas, I got the first 0.5 release of MTG Studio, and ever since then we have 134 releases, and there is a new 135th coming, pretty much next couple of days.
That's cool. So that player's name, he was a major Magic player, you said, that was like living in your area
Yeah,
and you got to know the guy.
yeah, and he's really a funny guy. Just he's even changed his last name to be Deck Off because he really likes the milling decks.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, he changed his last name? That's
yeah,
dedication right there.
yeah. Yeah, but anyway, in everybody's having its own personal life as well. So he's now a dentist. I'm a software development manager, and
Uh-huh.
meanwhile, in my spare time, I do magic software.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Okay. So I wrote down a couple questions to ask you to just make sure, because like I knew I was going to be excited to have this conversation, and I wanted to keep my thoughts on par here. So so the evolution of MTG Studio is something I wanted to ask you about, because we actually, for people that don't know, you and I actually spoke, I guess a couple weeks ago now, real briefly, over video chat like this. And
Mhm.
you had kind of briefed me on some of these topics, and you had mentioned how MTG Studio is going to be evolving, and kind of you see it that not like new applications, but just that application gaining either some new features or getting changed in some way. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So MTG Studio is kind of a constantly evolving in so many ways. It started as a desktop application. According, like 5 years afterwards, I gave a really not successful attempt to migrate it to the cloud, and created a domain called makedeck.com, which was really not popular, not used. Simply the client base was not there. Nowadays, as you can see, there is a lot of popularity of building your online collection, managing your collection
Yeah.
online. And MTG Studio is still stuck into the desktop kind of experience, which is in some ways good because it gives the people the flexibility to manage really huge collections. One of our users is having a store. Actually, he's a store owner, and he manages more than 500,000 of cards.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty, yeah, pretty impressive. One of the reports in MTG Studio was actually requested by his own demand. He said, "I'm actually having a mortgage on my house, and I'm paying my mortgage because I was able to present an MTG Studio report of my ownings from simply how the cards convert in market price value, and
Uh-huh.
that was sufficient enough
Wow.
that they can lease him a loan for a very big house."
Wow.
And it started as a competitor for Magic Workstation. Completely frankly, it started as a copy paste kind of a feature by feature equivalent of um, Magic Workstation, and definitely we stayed away for almost ever from making a solitary play test or multiplayer, because that is something that if you go into that realm, you are definitely going to the path of cease and desist letters, and you're pretty much out of
Got it.
business. But deck building was very popular by that time, at least the first 5 6 years of MTG Studio, because people were simply willing to make decks, and the biggest demand is make decks that are convertible to any kind of a multiplayer they can use. So it was Cockatrice, Octagon, Magic Workstation, Apprentice, Forge, and a couple of more. This is the sole reason why MTG Studio is currently one of the best tools supporting as many possible deck file formats both ways. It can import and export in that
Mm-hmm.
file format.
One of my
And then
favorite features when I actually converted from Magic Workstation over to MTG Studio, I was so thankful to see that you actually had an import function and you could take in the Magic Workstation file format. It was like the name of my collection dot Magic Workstation or something like that. I was really thankful because I had spent already at that point years adding cards to my collection and organizing it, and it was an exact mimic of all the cards I had. And at that time, it was like, I don't know, maybe 12 or 15,000 cards or something like that. And so the thought of having to add that all in again was just devastating. And that actually kept me away from several of those other tools that you just mentioned because I needed to have something that I could manage my collection with. And that since your tool was able to take in those files as an import, that just opened it right up for me, right?
yeah, yeah. We still support Magic Workstation and NW inventory file formats. Magic Suitcase is a popular one. What actually we have spotted is that over the course of time, people got more interested into I need collection building capabilities and managing my binders and converting my physical collection into an online kind of or desktop database that I can easily sort, filter, group by, and do reporting on. And this is actually the second stage of evolution of MTG Studio, going into collection mode. So there we created the deck building mode, then the collection building mode, and you can build your collection from your pool of cards. And finally, you can export this collection into various formats or present it in various ways or do reporting on top of that, which I do believe is still very popular. Lots of people find a lot of value into that. Perhaps one of the biggest contributor, to mention just somebody who helped me a lot, was a guy who's simply known by a nickname, Jason, and that's Jason guy who was actually very very punctual. He was constantly advising me that you have alternative art, but the Japanese alternative art of this card is reprinted twice, and taking into account the collection numbers are different, and all of those small gotchas that really a very dedicated collection builder
Mm.
is very accustomed to. And we've also had a very good relationship with the guy who's I do believe still managing the magic-librarities.com website, which is very much dedicated to having a website on the extraordinary magic cards, the
Mm.
ones of the misprints, the ones that are like the Salvat editions in Spain that has never been published anywhere else. And he's a very cool guy that is constantly willing to assist you if you mistype a Japanese character or something.
I want to throw a quick comment in there about how you said you have the support of all those different kind of collection versions of cards. that's actually one of the main things I really appreciate about MTG Studio compared to a lot of the other tools, because a lot of the other tools didn't have any data entry for cards in like a different language or like a foreign black border or a collector's edition version. And there was a time years ago where that didn't honestly really matter, because if like your Birds of Paradise was 4th edition or if it was like a foreign black border, there really wasn't much of a price difference, and if there was, it didn't really matter. That's starting to actually really matter these days, especially with like, I talk about old school format all the time, and there's people that are just flooding into old school, and it's causing people to seek out those alpha beta ones, but those spiked up. So now people are saying, well, what else can I get? I don't want to get a white border revised Swords to Plowshares, and the beta one is $250. So now they're going for the foreign black border. So the revised one, this is the reason why I'm telling this whole story. The revised one is like $1 for a Swords to Plowshares. The beta is $250. That foreign black border though is going to settle out somewhere like $30, $50, something like that. So it's now a big difference if it's actually going to be foreign black border. Now, I have used your application because yours is the best that I found at actually having a category to put that, and not having to just like put a note in that says like, oh, one of these is actually this, right? And that actually becomes even more important. Like if you like start integrating price features and things like that, then my collection pricing is completely wrong if I've got all these foreign black border or like, you know, like a foil Goblin Welder that's like foil Japanese. I mean, the price of that is like 1,000 times higher than like the normal Goblin Welder. So like these differences make a big difference, in my collection pricing is completely off if it doesn't have the right set. So you deserve a lot of props for that. All that work you did with the guy Jason that you were mentioning, it was really good, and it was noticed by people, especially by me.
Yeah, and actually this brings us to the so to say like third wave of improvements in MTG Studio. After the people started using the collection, they started mostly by simply categorizing and cataloging their stuff. They used the group column to actually label which drawer or binder this card physically is, kind of make a connection between the physical world and the virtual world of MTG Studio. But gradually over time, they started asking for prices, and it started really small, like, okay, I'm very interested around how much this deck would cost me or how much my collection is worth. And it takes like some kind of a special obsessive compulsive disorderly pride to know that you have $50,000 equivalent in Magic cards. But this evolved really quickly, and the markets became more and more. Originally, whenever the pricing features were added, it was ABU games, it was Magic Trader, and those kind of cool card, mint cards, and etc. kind of a popular sites. And then something happened, and the mindset of the user has changed dramatically. They were very willing to put all their cards into the cloud. They were not worried anymore to put them there. They started appreciating the fact that they would like to have real-time pricing. They would like not to import batch prices every single day. They would rather see how the market is shifting. And we went into pretty much in a mode where MTG Studio is still not fully capable of. If you simply consider Magic as another kind of forex trading, the cards became a currency, and people started making margins from simply trading. And the trading that was happening over those big competitions and the nationals and etc., where you backpack and you go there, you trade cards and you trump cards, really became an online game that you actually make money off. It became a business for some people to such an extent that there's even people who literally own tens of thousands of cards, but simply don't know even the basic rules of Magic. They've never played Magic. They use Magic as a source of income.
Yeah. So there's something to be said about like there's really good valid reasons why pricing needs to be there, and like everyone always like jumps to like, you know, the evil investor kind of perspective. But a reason that I really want prices to be there is a lot of times like I'll have a certain card I want to trade for, or a format that I want to play, or a deck that I want to go for, and there's cards in my collection that I love and I don't want to part with. But I mean, I've got in these drawers behind me, I've got thousands and thousands of cards. There's a bunch of them in there like I'm probably never going to play with. I mean, at some point I got them and I threw them in the collection because I didn't have 4 copies, but they just sit there. And if I have a good pricing tool, and the pricing tool like can highlight, here's some cards you have that are all worth $50 now, and I can look at them and say, well, I don't care about these cards. I'm more than willing to like trade those ones off or sell them on eBay, get a fund of like $700 and go buy myself another Mishra's Workshop. And so I've used it for that point specifically to but I guess like for the pricing part, like I showed in one of my earlier videos, I was actually using Echo MTG, the online website, and although I have like 35,000 cards in my collection, I only put like 1,800 cards into Echo MTG, and I put the ones that I knew were going to be the most expensive cards. And so now that's the one that I was doing the thing I was just describing. I'll look at the collection and say, okay, these are all cards I want to keep, but here's a bunch of cards that have value and I just don't care about. So I'm going to trade these into cards that I do care about. And it's been a really effective tool for me. And there's another direction, and you and I talked about this last time where I wanted to go with it. I use that tool also to kind of figure out, this is Echo MTG, with that I use it to see where I think a card is going to spike. And that's like a mix between like, I play formats and I'm used to the decks and the meta in that format. So I have a sense of what cards are either going to be good or like are undervalued. Like if I know a card is like, there's not very many of them out there, and I realize that the card's better than people give it credit for. And then I look on the prices and I can see that the price hasn't moved because on Echo MTG I can see that price trend. Then I can basically look at a card and say, you know what? If people figure out how good this card is, it's going to spike. And so I've been doing that lately, and I've been posting these cards in my Instagram channel. I've been telling people, hey, watch for this card because it's going to spike. And the accuracy has actually been really high. Like almost every one of them that I've said I think is going to price spike ended up doing it. But that was a mix between knowing the format and having a good tool that allowed me to compare all these prices and stuff. But it was unfortunate to me that I had to constantly go out of MTG Studio and go over to Echo MTG to actually do that. So any improvement for MTG Studio to have that same kind of pricing ability would just be fantastic, because then I'm sitting with just one tool and not having to maintain like two databases somewhere else. One of them that's like a fraction of the size of the other one, right?
Yeah, and we are definitely moving in that direction. For example, the next version that we'll be releasing very soon would actually be capable of having the prices of pretty much all cards but the version lands. So, because we're still working on the version lands, the place where we take prices from is an aggregator that is aggregating 1,900 other websites or personal inventories. And MTG Studio within the next releases would have definitely the high, the low, and the midpoint market price values, and there would be capability that you can update those prices yourself. The current process is a little bit tedious. It takes like 50 minutes to update the collection, all of the 38,000 unique MTG Studio cards. And most likely that would get improvements, significant improvements, being reduced down to 15 seconds. So,
oh wow,
yeah, we're going there, definitely. What we'll be willing to do in that direction is that there should be the capability that immediately after you pick a card and add it in your collection, you can see a real-time value. That real-time value would have the delay of not more than 6 hours. So it'll be very much on top of that. Perhaps another very interesting aspect around Magic prices is that actually MTG Studio currently is having some statistical capacities for deck building, and those were requested from really professional players. If you go to deck statistics, you'd be able to see, apart from the regular so-called manalyzer, which is actually a statistical term, is histogram of the distribution of mana colors. You also have the George Baxter's analysis, which is kind of another probability too. But we also have advanced descriptive statistics that give you really the midpoints, the averages, the quartiles, how you segregate the values, where they go to. And what I've actually found out, and this is kind of a very free tip for everybody on this channel, is that there is a very strong statistical correlation, proven statistical correlation between the length, the number of sentences within the rules, and the price of the card. The more the sentences in the rules, the higher the price is.
With the more the what in the rules?
The number of sentences.
The number of sentences.
So if you just count the number of dots within the rules, the number of dots within the rules are statistically correlated into pretty much 72%, which is very, very high. So if
Wow.
somebody is asking you, would the power really determine the price of the card? No. Would the toughness determine it? No. Would the special abilities like flying, trample, or whatever? No. But if you count the number of sentences, there's definitely some kind of a hidden statistical kind of a correlation, very strong correlation, which
Wow.
I'm pretty certain some experienced players might actually also consider as causation.
Wow. That's deep. I'd have to really look at that. That's interesting.
Yeah,
But if you're just looking
yeah.
at raw data and a correlation falls out, that's
Mhm.
important. So for the people that are watching that don't know, when you have a data set, like two data sets actually, the term correlation means that if the data moves like similar to each other, then a statistician will say they're correlated, and that basically means like it's not just random that one of them moved up and the other one moved along with it. The more they move together, the more they are correlated, and you can get a percentage based on that. A lot of finance guys do that for like stock markets and stuff like that when they're trying to figure out like, did the price of this stock, did it correlate with like the money supply and things like that. So yeah, that's just for, I have people that don't always like follow along with statistics and stuff like that. So
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that elaboration. And there is also a very funny fact: those cards that are lengthy in wording, in rules wording, also very interesting because they're also usually the ones that don't spike easily on the
hmm.
market. Like for example, if you have a very cheap 2/2 power toughness kind of a card, it's very easy, obvious to spot if it's cheap in mana and it's a good kind of a Kickstarter for kind of a not really combo, like an aggro deck. It's in your aggro deck. But those very, very comprehensive in ruling cards are very tough to understand from the jimmies and from even very experienced players. And it takes time that they learn all the mechanics and the hidden combos. And
Hmm.
actually, in my approximation, 2 to 3 months later, after the card has been released, the first boosters and etc., it starts to spike, and you start seeing a
Interesting.
growing trend of demand.
A
So
card I'm sure I've seen that in is Necropotence in Ice Age. I remember that card came out, and it was out for a while before like I started hearing rumblings about how good it was, and I saw it being used in these Ice Age decks by Randy Bueller and stuff. And then an entire summer was called Black Summer because the dominance of Necropotence decks. And I honestly remember, like, I almost feel ashamed to admit the first like 3 or 4 times I read that card, I was walking away like, what does this thing do? Why do I want it? So yeah, I guess that's that effect that you're talking about.
yeah, yeah, and it's not applicable to any card. So, for example, a Sarah Angel would always be a Sarah Angel. It's easy to understand what it does, and it's so powerful, so everybody wants it in his decks. So, definitely, maybe not the most powerful card nowadays, but one of those old school kind of I want to have it kind
Yeah,
of a card.
yeah.
Yeah, and the funny fact around that is that MTG Studio actually is moving also into the direction of bringing this insight into, so to say, regular people who doesn't really have to know statistics and have to be very comprehensive into that, but give some
Yeah.
advices into how to build the deck. It's a tough, complex subject, but definitely pricing most likely would be the next feature to come, advanced pricing,
Yeah.
real-time advanced pricing, and that is simply bundled with another request, which is very popular nowadays. Um, okay, I have my collection on my desktop. I I have ways that I can sync it to various devices, like simply put the
I was
collection
just
in your
about to ask you this question.
Dropbox folder. So you can, for example, lots of people use it at work and use MTG Studio at work and simply sync the collection through Dropbox, so they can use it on multiple PCs, which is fine licensing from licensing perspective. But still, most of us nowadays use mobiles. So the next
Yep.
direction is, what about I simply go to the store, or I simply meet a friend. He's asking, do you have 3 times this card? And I recall I have it. Was it 2 copies, three
Yep.
copies, 4 copies? I really don't know. And
Yep.
if you have a tool that would be able to simply very quickly show you do you have do I have this card, and what is the current real-time market price? Then you can definitely in a good position to argue around exchanging this card to some
Exactly. That would fill
simply.
such a gap. That is, I have such a desire for that. Like my collection here, I would
Mhm.
so love to have that just readily accessible right on my phone, and just to be able to pull it up and be like, do I have it? Yes or no, right? And then if I could get a price on like what it's worth, or what is a new one worth, or if I could add new cards to it, that would even be like a whole separate thing I would love just as much. But just the first thing is like if I could just quickly just click see my collection right there on my phone. Oh my gosh, that would be so useful.
Yeah, and here we can actually go two directions. One direction is we go to the cloud, which is kind of a very popular. You just have a website which is holding all of your collection. You get billed like let's say a couple of bucks on a monthly basis for simply keeping a database with your stuff on a central server, and very easy to build a mobile experience to sync with this server online, have an internet connection, and have this information on your phone. The problem with that approach from another angle is you keep your stuff on a server that is actually somebody else's server, and you don't have a full guarantee that this information with whom it is shared, how it is used. And we know what's happening currently with
Right.
Facebook and stuff like that. And the whole European Union is currently shaking with the new GDPR laws that will enforce personally identifiable information to be not shareable no matter what.
Well, just
So
if I can give you one consumer's perspective, like I honestly don't have any fear about having my collection listed on like a server. I mean, if I have a financial thing, like if I have my social security number or like my address or phone number on there, that's one thing. But I mean, you could just create a GUID or something for a user, and like maybe like I've got a GUID and you've got a GUID, or do it like a blockchain thing where there's like a hash key or something,
yeah.
and so like none of that information about like phone or address or any bank info, none of that needs to be on there. It's just if it holds my collection and somebody goes online and finds out what cards I own, if they're able to figure that hash key or something out, oh well, that's not the worst thing. I'm not worried about that. So I would think from that perspective, you're fine. Honestly, I don't think most people would have an issue with that. That's my assumption, anyways.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that is simply one of the approaches to go. Another approach, which most likely would be an interim solution, would be also we'll explore options around having the capacity to tether the device or have the device connected over USB and syncing that way. And definitely another option is use a cloud that is a little bit more secure, like Dropbox, for example. Simply for exchanging a file, encrypted file formats, not really holding all of your collection into a database on a server that somebody else as a company owns, but rather utilize your own Dropbox account. And Dropbox itself, it's not very popular, but actually Dropbox is hosted in Amazon Elastic Cloud,
Mm-hmm.
so it's protected a lot from Amazon security perspective.
Mm.
Amazon is very strong security-wise company, so Dropbox simply benefits indirectly from the fact that they actually host in Amazon. So perhaps that is another route to go. And I'm pretty certain like Dropbox, SugarSync, and similar kind of services are pretty much everybody has it nowadays.
So any of those options, it sounds fine. If the cloud-based ones you mentioned sounds fine. For me, like the most important thing would be like the speed at which the app works. If
Mhm.
one of them has a much lower latency, then
Yeah.
if you're going through lots of cards, then that would actually be much preferred. So if you could use one that's less secure but it's faster, I would actually lean more towards that, because especially when you got a bunch of cards, like it would be painful if it was like really slow, because it had to constantly like refresh a cache and download all the time. You mentioned the USB one. If
Yeah.
I had to only plug in a USB drive, I'd probably avoid that. I actually have a wireless charger on my phone, just
Yeah.
because my last phone, the plug wore out because I was always plugging in and out. And so I actually got this phone this is a Galaxy S8, just so I could wireless charge and not have to plug in all the time and avoid wearing out that USB 3 port. And so for the same kind of reason, like I would definitely prefer not to have to plug in the phone all the time. So yeah, hands down, I would go for a cloud-based solution that could just like sync easily, and I'm not that worried about the security of it. The speed of it is definitely there, and the usability of it. I want to be able to pick up my phone in the middle of a trade. I got cards in my lap, cards on the table. The guy is sitting there waiting for me to check something out. I just want to be able to unlock phone, Open the app. There's the fine. Okay, I got it. Just quickly get to it is really the key, right?
Yeah. Definitely one of the things that MTG has always been kind of very strict about. It's not coming from the users, it's actually coming from our perspective of thinking is it should be quick. It should import collections fast, it should export fast, it should be really as the quickest possible. That leads us to picking a toolchain that is not really popular but gives very native experience. And I'll just give an example. Like for example, the morphing of the images, switching from one card to another makes the images morph slightly. It's actually written in the lowest possible assembly language simply for the speed of having this.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, we won't sacrifice this, that is for sure. If it's a mobile experience, it would be a native application, and it would be an application that you'll be able to look up by the first three letters of the card name, and it should return within 30 milliseconds the response. Actually, I'm
Hmm.
currently building this prototype. The current response rate is around 35 milliseconds to look up a card from your collection, which is definitely where we would like to keep it, because I hear you whenever you say, and some guys asking me, Lightning Bolt 4th edition. You
Yeah.
don't have the time to type Lightning Bolt. You simply would like to type LI and then space 4E. And that
Yeah.
should be sufficient enough because there are not so many Lightning stuff in 4th edition, for example. So,
Yes.
from usability perspective, I hear you. It should be very, very quick. Might not be even pretty, but it should be very quick so you can literally answer this question immediately. See the price, see the quantities you have, give the answer. Yes, you have
Yeah.
it.
Then you can stay engaged with the person you're trading with instead of like just sitting there staring at your phone for 5 minutes while they twiddle their thumbs. So, Gad, we got this interview going on a pretty good amount of time. It's probably a good point to cut this one off and save some other information for the next time. Is there any last things you want to say to people before we go?
Yeah, definitely. Perhaps what I would like to request, and it's a real request from my side, is we do have a forum. We use user voice for capturing user input. Feel free to share. We also have a support email. Feel free to share any of your ideas because actually the best ideas of progression of MTG Studio simply came from guys who are not shy to approach us and tell us, I really need this feature. I would like to have it that way. And 90% of the features that are in MTG Studio are actually not invented by myself. It actually came from somebody who is having a real business case, a real problem to be solved.
I love it that you work with people like that. That's awesome. Okay, so just email me those links and I'll put them below in the video when I post the video online, okay?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks a lot for your time, Gad. It was great talking to you, and I hope to do something like this again pretty soon, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Love to meet you guys and keep safe. Bye
Okay,
bye.
bye everybody.